It's the My Michelle Live podcast.
My Michelle Live. My Michelle Live. Sports timeout. The fans, the field, the faith, the fun. Here's Michelle.
Yes, I am. Hey, thanks for joining in. It is My Michelle Live every day of the week that we podcast. We go from a different bent, a different angle, a different way to look at news, different news altogether, science and technology, natural health, news, views, entertainment. But on Fridays, it gets fun. It gets crazy. It gets a little crowded. But what it also gets, get ready for it, sports! Sports. That was actually pretty today. If that's shades of things to come, we are in good form. Let me just introduce you to the fellas. We've got a full table of commentators today, each with their own expertise in sports. We'll start at my bottom right. We call him the Wookiee of the Year. You can find him on Twitter at Josh Reports Live. He is our sports authority, Josh.
Wookiee of the Year, Josh McMillan.
Yeah, just above him in the Brady Bunch boxes as you're watching, wherever you may be watching. He is the man who has been broadcasting, forever. Veteran sports reporter, author of Thunder Sports Network, and our own encyclopedia of sports, Rich Hallstrom.
Encyclopedia Rich.
That's right. Encyclopedia Rich, we call him. We have with us Garrick Payne. He's a pastor. He's a coach. He's a chaplain. He's an all-around cool guy. He is the man who, well, we'll just say he gets us pinged.
Get ready to get...
Hey, Reverend, you could have just said amen.
Amen. Brent R. Baker is the author of this book, Breaking Yesterday. Had nothing to do with sports. It's actually sci-fi and freaking phenomenal. But he is also a sports reporter, coach himself, and a sports photographer, Brent R.
Author,
Baker.
photographer, Brent R. Baker.
We have with us the man himself. Ooh, what a guy he is. This is his book, Athlete in the Game of Life. He also has classes and help for you to stretch and strengthen yourself out of just about any predicament you could get into. Matt.
What a guy. What a guy. What a guy.
Matt Peel, and of course, I am your humble host, Michelle Mendoza.
Don't stand too close. She may put out your eye with a gleam of her smile. Here's Michelle.
All right, gentlemen, and those of you joining in, so glad to have you today. Today on our show, there is so much to talk about because, wow, every moment there is something happening on your television screens from one end of the spectrum to the other. We are going to start off with the Olympics.
Now, one of us forgot to bring the flame, so who's going to take the...
Where is it?
Well, the Olympics...
I have no fun.
Guys, let's start with some of the Olympic counts. China is in the lead with gold medals, 19. Right behind Japan, great for the host country. They have 17 gold medals, and the United States is bronze and gold, by coming in third with 14 medals. Though the United States does lead the pack in altogether medals. So USA, Brent R. Baker, 41 medals, followed by China, and then the team formerly known as Russia. They joined the
Russian
formerly
alphabet.
known as Prince.
The Russian alphabet.
And the football team formerly known,
Formerly known as
yeah.
Yeah.
But when I first saw that,
it took me a little while to figure out what's ROC.
I know.
Like, that's the country that's on probation, doesn't get to fly
The
their flag,
Russian
but they still
Olympic
get to go.
Conspiracy. ROC.
but see, I thought it was Taiwan because they go by ROC, the Republic of China. So, but
Isn't
clearly,
there a refugee team, or is that different?
No, there is
different.
an actual Olympic refugee team also. Yeah, that is delineated by the International Olympic Committee.
Yeah, so very interesting Olympics. There's been a lot of firsts. There's been some twists and turns. Something that happened that I wanted to follow up on. People don't necessarily know. Connor Fields, who is a BMX racer, won gold in Brazil, had a nasty spill and caused others to spill. Looked to me like he caught a tire as he's going on the track. He is in ICU right now. He is awake and alert. He's had 2 CAT scans. The second one was encouraging. They'll have a third one today. But here's this gentleman defending his gold title as an American in the BMX bike racing, and boom. I watched that and I was astounded. So real sad. He is in ICU right now. There's been some other interesting firsts, and then I'm going to open it up to you. I want to share with you, to me, the weirdest first in the Olympics, and it has to do with a condom. So I'll let you marinate on that for just a moment. Yes, it is still a G-rated show, at least for now. Let's take on some of your impressions. We'll start with Rich.
Well, I think the number one thing that we see, the United States as an athletic program, overall balance, leading the way in total medals. Katie Ledecky once again showing that she is probably the best women's swimmer ever to grace the pool, multiple medals. Also, Suni Lee with a great performance in gymnastics, coming around with the all-around title, having to leap some hurdles there, both on and off the mat for the U.S. team, and I'm sure that we'll get into that at one point. But that's a great story. I think too much has been made of off the field competition stories and not enough about actual competition
How so?
stories. Well, let's just not mince words. Too much Simone Biles for her not competing. Not enough focus on the actual people who are competing.
Okay.
Simone Biles is an important story, but someone who chooses not to compete should not overshadow and take away from those who are competing.
Okay. Matt.
I like watching, honestly, the non-mainstream sports. I know I said I was going to protest, so it has yet to go on my TV.
Excellent
but when I'm at the gym and it's on at different hours, so I have fallen in love just with watching team handball. And I don't know if anybody else has watched that. Maybe just because it fits my skill set. And the Americans, we probably suck at it, but it doesn't really matter. It's just fun to watch that. It's a new thing, and I've been watching just before I came on to this, like badminton and table tennis. And the Asians dominate in that, but it's just fun to watch. I like seeing those things that it's not made for prime time.
That's a very good, but some things that we don't always see. I mean, Josh, during COVID, you were bringing to the table marbles because that was the only thing we could watch.
Marble Run, the Marbula One racing I still watched it. It's great. Should be in the Olympics, to be honest.
Next year, next time. Demonstration sport.
Yeah, I will. There you go, right there. But so watching some of those, I have loved watching the slalom kayaking. I want to do that. That would be my sport. I would love that. So that's been really, really fun to watch. So I'm with you, Matt. Let's go to Garrick.
Oh yeah, the Olympics are great. Just the feel and the competition, and just I love the Olympics. I became hooked on the Olympics in the 1970s, actually, when Sugar Ray Leonard was boxing, and I spent the summer with my grandma, and so we sat and watched the Olympics, and it was just wonderful. And so I have really fond memories of the Olympics. But I also have kind of a pet peeve about the Olympics, or at least the U.S. coverage of the Olympics. So I tend to flip over, because I do have cable, and I watch the Canadian coverage.
CBC all the way, my man.
Yeah, because they it seems to be a little bit more balanced. And of course, they hype up the Canadians, just as they should. But I was watching NBC's on YouTube, watching their Olympic highlights, and it's just, it's very American. I don't know. It just wasn't as. So I was watching the volleyball, the women's volleyball, and they were playing. Can't remember if it's the Netherlands, and but they were. But they just showed all the American points, and granted, it was just the highlights, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more balance, I guess.
Do you
It's
also
more like the
think-
CNBC and some of their offshoot sister networks play some of the other things. That's what I've been.
That's
I guess
exactly-
whatever's been on.
Yeah.
That's why I get to see some of that.
I mean, like badminton, you had mentioned in India, it's so huge. Is it Sindhu is one of the top paid athletes in the world.
Correct.
And she
Correct.
plays freaking badminton, and we don't really
Nice.
we think of badminton as something that, maybe you play in the backyard once in a while, not as a real sport, but with that kind of money, it is indeed. Do you think that the American coverage
on badminton, if you ever have a chance to look up Mary Carrillo's badminton rant from 20 years ago. She did it in the studio, and it wasn't originally meant to be aired, but it is one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen. It's really good. Mary Carrillo's been broadcasting a long time, and apparently this has been immortalized for her, but I'd never seen it before this week.
what was it? What was she saying?
She's a tennis, right? She's a tennis announcer.
Yeah, she's a tennis announcer, but she first starts talking about analyzing the shuttlecocks and stuff, but then comparing it to how you play in the backyard, and it's then you get the shuttlecock stuck up in the tree, and then the racket gets stuck up in the tree, and then you realize you actually have 12 footballs in your garage as you're throwing up to the tree to get stuff knocked down, and then you have the whole neighborhood over there. So yeah, it's worth watching. I think for me, go ahead.
I was going to ask, playing off of what you said, Garrick, does anyone think that the United States coverage of the Olympics, I've noticed, is a lot of the let's make it big and loud and bright? And I've noticed that I guess a lot of hype where Canadian coverage, for example, has a more personal. You'll see some interviews with the family, or you'll see the family talking. Getting to see their family and some of that interaction, and more of a real kind of a feel. That was my impression. But America does like to hype. So anyone who wants to comment on that, and then Brent, what are your thoughts on the Olympics? What are your biggest impressions?
Well, man, what a performance by Suni Lee. I mean, that, when you change your mindset, everybody going into the gymnastics competition, I know that basically we're competing, at least as far as how everything was presented, was everybody is competing for the silver. And Simone Biles was just like a shoe-in to win it. And, after watching the trials a bit, I was wondering if it wasn't going to be such a shoe-in. I didn't expect what did happen, but Suni Lee, coming through the way she did was awesome. I think the other moments that I really enjoyed, Caleb Dressel, just a great.
My gosh, you have to share what happened with Caleb Dressel. That was freaking crazy. Even the announcers, it was if you were watching his swimming event, you didn't even see the United States flag. You didn't even know if he was racing until the last few
Till the
seconds.
very end. Out touches a guy, and then it was just cool, the whole
Turbo.
that
He went into
interaction.
turbo mode.
Yeah, went into turbo mode, but afterwards, when they were trying to interview him, and they kind of did the Zoom thing with his family, and he couldn't even talk, and it was just so emotional for him. I enjoyed that. I think the performance, though, as great as Caleb Dressel was, that Bobby Fink in the 800 free, that's a brutal event. And when they made the final turn, he was 2 lengths behind the leader. It was like, whether or not, it seemed like, it was like my buddy and I that were watching were like, man, that'd be cool if he got a medal. And to make up that kind of length and win the gold, the first ever 800 free, that was a performance that I won't forget. That was amazing. And then just as far as for me also, I actually got into watching the women's 7 rugby. That was fun.
Yeah, that was cool to watch. I tell you, those chicks can smash each other. Even the men's 7, the Fiji team.
Yeah.
Those guys are freight trains, man. They will decapitate you.
Yeah, and you think about that without pads and helmets, and
the American football is a bunch of wusses.
Right. I wish they put Aussie rules football in the Olympics. That's a great one, but another year maybe.
There you go. Joshua, let's get you weighing in on the Olympics. I know you have a new baby at home, so your main event is diaper changing, but have you had a chance to tune in?
Honestly, no, I haven't been paying any attention. I've been kind of over from the beginning this time. I don't know. The one thing I'll say is there was a forgot what her name was, but I did see some video of a woman that did sharpshooting with the pistol, and her stance was just absolutely great. It was the most cowboy, I don't give a care stance I've ever seen, like hand in pocket, gun kind of slack in hand, and won gold medal. So, it worked.
USA.
I saw that. I thought it was hilarious. And it was also funny that, I saw a picture of it and I saw someone commenting, you can't hold a gun like that. There's too much recoil. And here she is winning the gold medal. Someone was like, she won gold, right? It's ultimate, mansplaining fail. It was great. But that's basically all I got for the Olympics. Other than that, I've been
That works. Okay, I'm going to share with you my story, and it has to do with a gold medal and a condom. Yes, indeed. An Australian kayaker fixed a leak in her canoe. I'm sorry, it wasn't a kayak, it was a canoe. Jess Fox had a condom on hand. She said before she won her first Olympic gold medal in the women's C1 canoe slalom, and bronze, by the way. Later, she shared a video where she was repairing the damaged nose of her kayak using a condom. And she said, you know what? I bet you never knew condoms could be used for kayak repairs. So that's why you guys always have them in your wallets.
Yeah.
So the question is, was that the purpose that she had it for, kayak repair? I guess we'll never know, but
have any of y'all been to a Summer Olympic event? Just out of curiosity, have any from '96 or in Atlanta or '84 in LA?
96.
What was your question?
Has any of y'all been to? I know the Winter Olympics have been up there, but been to a Summer Olympic event when it was in '96 in Atlanta, or back in '84 when it was in Los Angeles? Has anybody gone to an event?
Well, the closest I've been is 2004 Paralympic Games in Athens, Greece, and we'll get into the Paralympic Games here in a few weeks. But definitely with the Olympics and Paralympics working together in tandem to promote international sports. Those are great events, and they have their own unique appeal and character, and it's different. It's different than going to a Super Bowl, which I've also had the chance to go to, and it is really, really different.
Again, maybe some of the hype.
A little boy in 84, I was a little kid living in Los Angeles, and so my grandparents took me to go see men's field hockey. Let's see, in 84, what does a 9-year-old know about men's field hockey in 1984? Nothing. Zero. Except we went up and it was like Pakistan versus India. Again, two countries that a 9-year-old boy knows zero about. Then the only thing I remember from the whole crowd going at East LA Community College going, Pakistan. I was like, oh, look, there's a guy there with some fingernails that are about that long too. That's pretty crazy. But that's the only Olympic event I've been to, and then I've seen the women's marathon as it goes on the road race. All right, there they went. But it is pretty different. It's neat to again see these different sports, not just your standard football, basketball. Even soccer for us. It's cool to see these different things.
Yeah, I really enjoyed archery. Some of the extraordinary things that you just aren't exposed to. But I was talking with someone this week, guys, that maybe coverage could include just a regular person, regular everyday athlete, maybe. Well, I'll volunteer Matt to not compete, but to maybe try out some of these sports. Like I would love to do the kayak slalom, just a regular person, just to show maybe the level of difficulty, to show what you need in order to do some of these things. How difficult is it to traverse a BMX bike track? I just think that would be kind of interesting. What are your thoughts? I mean,
one of us could try a flip on a balance beam.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that.
Rich.
Yeah. Make sure the ambulance is close by.
Well, I will do I will. This is not really a big stretch for me, but I would volunteer for the wheelchair rugby. We'll get into that in a couple of weeks with Paralympics. But that is something I would volunteer myself for, and I would make sure that I had like 17 pillows underneath me and around me.
And your health insurance
bubbles, dude. We could just wheel your chair right into one of those bubbles. How about any of you? What I would love to do kayak slalom. What would be your event if you could turn on the inner Olympic inside of you?
Well, go ahead, Josh.
So here's the thing I would actually really like to see at the Olympics. And I heard someone else suggest this as well. Something like a triathlon, but instead, like you sign up for it, and it's just any like 3 to 5 random sports at the Olympics, like that you have to compete in. That you got to be prepared for anything. They basically draw it out of a hat, and you have to compete at these and see how you do. I think that would be a lot of fun.
BMX, archery, and then you got to run a marathon.
Yeah, and skeet shooting, maybe. Just put all the individual sports.
Equestrian sports.
You got to compete. You have to be ready for anything they throw at you. You got to be like the ultimate athlete out there.
Go get on that horse.
Call them the Olympian.
Jump that fence.
All right, I'm
envisioning this really funny video montage. Exactly.
It is.
But I think of all the sports that I would probably embarrass myself most in would be any of the gymnastics events, especially the rings. Okay, because I'd be like hanging like this, and I'm like,
how long can you hang on?
Yeah, right. But I mean, remember back in the day, some of you are old enough to remember when it was such a big deal when someone could do the Iron Cross, right? Because that is quite. I mean, it takes incredible strength and discipline and all those different factors that need to balance and all that. And now that's just one of the normal things that you have to do if you're going to be competitive. And oh my goodness, I can't even.
So if you could imagine having to do 3 different events, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, some of the folks that I may have watched in the archery, I think it may have been France that was leading over the United States in one of the events, and that guy looked like he was the guy from France looked like he was a redneck from somewhere down south, and he was not, athlete shape, we'll say. I'm like, I can't imagine someone like that, doing gymnastic dancing, or so, I'm not sure, Josh, that would work. But I will say, I did look it up, and as we were talking about other uses for condoms, apparently it's popular in boxing to fill with ice and to freeze to use as ice packs in boxing. Some people will use them, by the way, to protect their cell phones while kayaking. So there's some uses there.
I just use a Ziploc bag. So.
One other thing I wanted to talk about, and this takes us into some other sports, unless there's anything else we want to bring up in the Olympics. There's a lot going on. I wanted to bring up a German official that was sent home for racial slurs. Did you guys hear about that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Tell us.
Was a cycling official. Then he's been suspended, sent home from the Tokyo Games because he used a racial slur during the men's trial time. So German Cycling Federation sports director Patrick Moster had been overseeing the cycling squad there, and he used the slur while urging a German rider to catch up to riders from African nations. So, this on that.
So who did he slur, though? That's what I want to know. Did he slur the African or did he slur the German?
Of course,
I'm sure it won't say.
No. And that's the thing. Unless you're watching it and you hear it, it isn't that easy because they don't want to say the slur. We're looking at the CONCACAF gold competition, watching Canada and Mexico. They had to stop the game because and I'm gonna say this too. Mexico, your fans suck. They had to stop the game. I mean, what vileness!
Yeah,
because of racial.
This is going on multiple times. This is going on multiple times, Michelle. You got to get a clue. Yeah. On this one, get a clue.
Okay, so I'm for one. You guys weigh in if you want. I'm for having thick skin. I don't want to be offended at absolutely everything, because we get to the point where we're so, oh gosh, it may offend me, and everything has to come with a warning, right? But there's a place where we have to cross the line, where we cannot cross the line, and I applaud the officials for stopping the game and saying, you know what, we're not going to continue if you can't get yourself under control, because there's just no place for that. Nor a German cycling official who needs to have a higher standard. Heck no. I don't care what the slur is. You go off the cuff. We all who have done commentary, you go off the cuff at times, but you need to have a level of professionalism, Matt.
Completely agreed. As we've been talking about this, though, I've been thinking about actually, and Garrick, maybe you can chime in on this, as my soccer playing career, and when I've played with and against various nationalities, and I am a Mexican heritage, and I will say this: playing against teams that are primarily composed of Mexicans in my tenure as a soccer player, have always been the dirtiest. Have always been the most brutal. They say a lot. There's a lot of words going on out there, and why, I don't know. So it does not surprise me, unfortunately, that this is going on. And I know, Rich, you nod your head too. It's unacceptable. But Garrick, I don't know what's been your experience as a player.
Yeah, I've experienced similar things. We have it's primarily Hispanic league here, Liga Hispania, that is adult men's competition, and I've played in it from time to time, not probably for a couple of decades, but yeah, it was very intense, and a lot of and I think part of it is that there's a machismo in the as a part of the culture, you know, and a male pride, which you know, I think that contributes to it, but you know. And as you get older and as you progress in the game, and especially if you're playing recreationally, there's just no place for it. And I mean, there's heavy competition and people want to win, but it's still a game. And I mean, when you're competing on the international level, I can see why people get very hyped up about it and very passionate. But as you said, Michelle, I think people need to know where the line is, and you just need to not cross it. And if you do, then I think appropriate measures should be taken. And I agree with, I think, everybody here. We're all in agreement that the cycling official, as well as the Mexican fans, should have been reprimanded, and I'm glad that they were.
Officials on any level should be the ones that are setting. Officials on any level are the ones that should be setting the tone. The people who run organizations, the people who are presidents of organizations, the International Olympic Committee president should be the one setting the tone for the International Olympic Committee. For example, let's take Pete Carroll, for example. Pete Carroll is the one
of the Seattle Seahawks.
Of the Seahawks is the one who sets the tone for everything that happens, and we know that, and that's one of the things that we like about the Seahawk organization is that he has his hands in everything, and his fingerprints are all over everything. But that's what makes the Seahawks successful, is because they have one vision, and they have one set of standards. You may not agree with everything that Pete Carroll does, but he does have a philosophy, and he does try to stick to it. And I think in terms of international competition and the Olympics and all these other things that we see, I think we make too many excuses for using the word competition. Competition does not mean that you can act like a fool or an idiot.
No, I think on a high-level competition, we should demand a level of mutual respect. It's called sportsmanship and professionalism. I mentioned CONCACAF, the Gold Cup, and I wanted to quickly give standings. In Group A, Mexico is up on top. So they're bad fans and all. There they are in Group B, USA, followed by Canada. Group C, Costa Rica, and Group D is Qatar. So usually we see a Mexico-USA final. We'll see if that happens this year. Now, obviously, Rich has a thing for the Seattle Seahawks, and so I think it's time that we talk NFL. NFL training camp starts this week. It opened for the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers last week because they're going to be playing the Hall of Fame game on August 5th. The Hall of Fame game is the first preseason game of this year, and it kicks off Hall of Fame extravaganzas, of course, in Canton, Ohio, that includes enshrinements of the 2020 and 2021 Hall of Fame classes. So there's some interesting things as we go into training camp, guys. And Josh, in a few moments, of course, you're going to give us the countdown to kick off, which will be exciting. Matt, I wanted to ask you, I've been thinking about this. Who do you think, now you're down there in NOLA, my birth town, New Orleans, Louisiana, the New Orleans Saints, my second favorite football team. I want to ask you, who do you think is going to emerge from the Saints battle of Winston and Hill?
If I'm the coach, I'm going to go with Winston. Training camp opened yesterday, and Taysom Hill was penciled in with the ones to go. So we'll see. I think he's got better as an overall NFL quarterback, even though he's turned the ball over. We all get that. I think he just understands being an NFL quarterback better than Taysom. I guess when we talk about what can I think of his name now? Tebow, right? Tebow. Tebow is a great Taysom Hill type player. Is he a starting quarterback? No, I don't think Taysom Hill is a starting quarterback either. Now it's interesting and I'm sure I'll segue to everything else, with the Rodgers showing up and getting rid of his contract. Now we look at like our team, the Saints, and go, okay, so what if we just kind of mail it in this year and now get ourselves involved for, the Rodgers extravaganza, come next year? That's a distinct possibility for us.
Well, I think a distinct possibility of the Saints struggling too. You look at the situation with Michael Thomas and his apparently delayed surgery that now is going to cost him a good portion of the year, and you wonder some of these things. You wonder what effects it has on the other guys on the team. But man, you take away with a guy like Winston, who's been prone to turnovers, you take away a premier target.
Yeah, we don't have any receivers this year. I'll be honest with you.
Right, that's going to hurt. I guess the thing apparently with Winston, they fixed some things with his vision, so that might help. But it's hard to hang on the ball when you got nowhere to throw it.
That's another thing about him, and just any athlete. This is not just particular about Winston, but these athletes have means, right? They obviously have means to buy themselves groceries and pay the car insurance. Why are you waiting this long to get your eyes fixed? You've been an NFL quarterback
for years.
For years, right? You made enough money to write a check for eye surgery, for LASIK. You don't need financing and $99 an eye. So why are you waiting this long to get this done?
That's a good point.
I don't know.
That's hard to figure. Yeah.
Okay, another question I have, I wanted to present to the group, is the idea of skipping out on camp. Right? I think we've had something like 7 major players that skipped out on mini camps in June. Seahawks safety Jamal Adams, Dolphins cornerback Xavier Howard, Aaron Rodgers, of course, skipped out on mini camp. What about moving forward, training camp holdouts? Are we going to see much of that? Because I know that under contract, they're mostly going to be a thing of the past because of the penalties in the 2020 NFLPA collective bargaining agreement. So, there is always a wonder, who's going to show up, who's not. Pretty much a thing of the past, fellas?
Well, I don't think it's ever pretty much a thing of the past, because I got to tell you, from covering the Seahawks for a number of years and just covering football in general, training camp and fall practice, whether it be for a college team, guys don't really like all that stuff. They try to do as little as possible, and let's get to the games. Let's get to what really counts.
Wait a minute. How many? I mean, come on. Half of you guys are coaches or have been coaches. Can you imagine taking Brent, your high school players, and saying, "Oh, okay, well, I know we don't like training very much, so we're just going to get right to the game"? How does that work?
I don't have to imagine it.
You've had that happen because of COVID.
We had that happen because of COVID, and it wasn't at the start of the season, so the kids weren't completely out of shape. But we went through a COVID quarantine, and so it went a week and a half without having any practice or seeing our kids until we actually got on the bus to go to our regional championship meet at the end of the season. And it was chaotic. It was crazy. I am glad we did it, but just because of everything, COVID and the mental things that it's caused with so many people, and it was just good to have them out there. But like in our case, the runners actually did okay, and that's largely because of how you train with running. A lot of times at the end of the season, you do less to keep your legs fresh and stuff. So the runners did well. The field events, where there's a lot of repetition and muscle memory and stuff, they were out of whack.
Yeah,
It was
that's not gonna cut it.
All right, let's.
You can.
Well, and we can see the results last season of the NFL because remember, injuries is one, but early on in the season, the defenses really struggled. To Brent's point, in terms of it depends on what. And you're seeing all these crazy high-scoring games. I had Russell Wilson as my fantasy quarterback, and it was awesome because he was racking it up. But then as the defenses started to settle in because of the no preseason, I think we began to see how that kind of played its effects out towards the end of the season.
Well,
I mean, no one likes practice like that. As an athlete, do we like going into preseason practice? Absolutely not. It sucks. It's horrible. But you got to do it, and it's part of life. But even as Garrick on a professional level, did that preseason? Yeah, no one likes it. No one wants to show up and do these things.
Yeah. And so I would love to say that it's a thing of the past, but I think. It really does depend on the position, because certain position players in the NFL, you really can get away to a degree with missing the preseason training, and it's not as critical.
Yeah, but this is high level sports. You need that training. Not only that,
you do.
As I mentioned, injuries. Matt, you're a specialist in strengthening and stretching and helping your body to train for the game of life. How much more so for a professional sports team?
It's super critical. You have to get your body in rhythm for the sport, whichever it is. But yeah, you have to develop your mobility. You have to get your game speed and your mind, the mind-muscle connections. You were saying, Brent, the field events. Yeah, you're right. The shot put, the javelin, you got to know your steps. If you don't know your steps, well, I mean, a little facetious, but now you trip and you impale yourself, right? No one wants to see the javelin through a guy's ear. So you have to.
I think that the biggest adventure we actually had was high jump.
You run face first in the bar. That doesn't work either.
Or miss the pad, it's all that. It's none of it's good.
None of it's good. So your muscles have to be ready. Your cardiovascular conditioning, your muscle conditioning has to be ready to go. And I think one of the reasons why they don't like training camp as much now is because everybody's pretty much trying to stay in shape year round. Right? There really is no quote unquote off season. You're not in physical contact, maybe.
That's exactly right.
But they're doing. Look at what's going on down there in San Diego with Todd. I forget his name. But it's where Drew Brees would go every off season, and a handful of other football players. So they're not coming in fat and out of shape like the New York Yankees of the 1950s. Right, where they truly needed spring trainings to quit their smoking and drinking habits.
They're driving a mail truck during the summer or something.
Oh, let's also add this in, Matt. A lot of the old time football players and basketball players, especially, had other jobs.
Yeah, that's what you were saying, Brent. Yeah,
to augment their income in the off season. So their insurance job was a job they did for 6 months, and then we did the football job, but as you said, Matt, it's not like that anymore.
Another issue in the NFL, Josh, before we proceed, let us know just how long it is until NFL kickoff.
Yeah, for NFL kickoff right now, we're at 41 days, 4 hours, 14 minutes, and 7 seconds.
Aha.
But who's counting?
And then my question to you is, how many of those NFL players that are going to be engaging in the 2021 season are going to be vaccinated now that the NFL has made it pretty harsh? I want to play for you our roundtable. You won't see the soundbite, but you will hear the soundbite. This is what some of the players had to say. Take a listen.
So many players around the NFL safety does not solely mean avoiding the COVID virus.
You look around and almost everybody's either been vaccinated or in process. I'm currently in process right now, so
that's Ryan Tannehill.
That's where it's at. But
the Titans.
Yeah, I think the NFL has kind of made it clear what they want to happen, and if you don't fall in line, they're going to try to make your life kind of miserable with all the protocols. So.
Yeah, so they fully expect their life to be a little bit miserable if they don't want to get the vaccine. Still very interesting because we have more and more information that the vaccine, having the vaccine, you can still contract corona. You can still give corona. There's even some studies that are showing the vaccine is only good for about 6 weeks. Garrick, you have some firsthand knowledge in this situation right now in your flippin' household.
Yeah. So a member of our household who is vaccinated did contract the coronavirus, and so there is that, and so they're saying that this is I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole of coronavirus, but they talk about vaccine hesitancy, and the reason that there's vaccine hesitancy, in my opinion, is because not all the facts are being presented, and
do we know everything that we could know. So if I might just say, for just a moment, as you're listening, watching, or reading, marry those together. We don't know everything we can know. It's still very experimental, and we're having information not being presented. And so if that's the case, vaccines, while they can be fabulous, will never get better if we don't hold people accountable and if we aren't talking about what some of the problems are, including paralysis, blood clots. Could you imagine being an NFL player and never being able to use your legs again, or at least partially? So my question to you, Josh, is if the vaccine causes issues, there's been a number of deaths, more deaths from the vaccine than all other vaccines combined. And that's morality or morbidity that is at the worst degree. I get that. But Josh, if there's a problem, can players sue the NFL?
They should. They absolutely should. I mean, I talked about this last time, is that the Players Association is an absolute joke. There's in no world should the Players Association should have agreed to this. It's like just stripping entire sections of their people who they represent, the players, of rights. I mean, it's to an unreasonable extent. And we aren't seeing good results necessarily from the vaccine, where we saw the CDC come out and say that they can get a viral load equal to that of an unvaccinated person and can still transmit the virus just like an unvaccinated person can. And we've seen, as we just talked about, people who are still getting coronavirus while having the vaccine. So it's just like, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical of it. To say that they're ridiculous and that they should have to deal with this or be cut from the team, as a lot of people are implying, I think is silly. And I do think that there's a good opportunity for a lawyer to come in and say, hey, NFL Players Association did an awful job. This is honestly discriminatory and awful, and you should not be able to put things like this in place.
Yeah. Well, anyone else?
All right. So can I read this real quick? I'm reading here. Just the definition of what the word vaccine is. So let's read that definition, and then is this actually what the definition says? This is from Oxford Languages. Vaccine, noun, a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases. Prepared from the causative agent of a disease, its products, or a synthetic substitute, treated to act as an antigen without inducing the disease.
Uh-oh.
Is that really what this is?
You had me to the
definition
end. You had me to the end.
Vaccine.
Huh.
So there you go. I think, number one, there's a huge misnomer. Because when we think vaccine, what do we think? Polio, measles, mumps, rubella, right? Here you go. Hey, I'm good for the rest of my life. I think it's terminology. This is not a vaccine. It's something else. I don't know the term, but it's not a vaccine. Right. What the term?
Right. Like flu shot is not necessarily called a vaccine.
Right. It's a flu shot. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Wow. That gives you a little bit of food for thought. And it's a good thing that we're talking about it, because if it's being shut down in some areas again, it will never get better. Yes, there are a lot of issues still with polio, with mumps, rubella, chicken pox. There's problems at times with adjuvants. There's things that are put into vaccines that can cause allergies and bad reactions. And you can look at the VAERS site that the government puts out on adverse vaccine reactions that talks about all of these, including death. And it is real and oftentimes very, very rare. But nonetheless, if we know about it, we can make it better. If we shut down the conversation, we cannot. If we force NFL players against their conscience, against their religious convictions, or against the advice of their doctors to either quit their job or get the jab when it's still in not even a vaccine, as you point out, Matt, and in an experimental stage, I think we've gone a bit too far. Here's another story I wanted to get to. And that's from the NBA. Now we have some NBA draft things going on, and that's really exciting. But there's some NBA players, guys, who may be facing off against another opponent off the court, and that is Congress. Some Republicans are expecting that NBA players sever endorsement contracts with Chinese sportswear firms whose cotton supply chains are implicated in forced labor in China's Xinjiang province. We've talked a lot about the selective outrage of our sports stars. We're going to kneel and Black Lives Matter, but we don't care what's going on in the southern border. I guess brown lives don't matter when girls and women are sold in as sex slaves. We don't care. I guess yellow lives don't matter when we can shoot our baskets and turn our backs during the national anthem, and yet the very sportswear, the very cotton in the sportswear that you're slinging is made from slave labor. So a bit of selective outrage. Is it about time that we say, hey, if you're going to be all woke, you might as well wake up a little bit more?
Well, Michelle, it comes down to, let's talk about this for a minute. Do you think LeBron James really cares about where his sneakers are made and who actually puts his sneakers together?
Well, he seems to care about a lot of things. Josh, you're a LeBron James fan. He cares about a lot of things and cares about a lot of people and does a lot of great things in his community. So shouldn't he care about where his sneakers are made, Josh?
Yeah, he should. But as with all things, I've complained about this before with the NBA, is that selective outrage and not really caring. They make money off China, so they don't really care what happens in China. They don't care about inequality or issues that are happening like Hong Kong. They don't care.
There's never going to be
money there.
There will never be a free Hong Kong NBA jersey.
I think No, you're right. I think it's particularly galling, though, that with when we talk about Black Lives Matter and we talk about the history of slavery in this country, and yet here is modern day slavery being used to produce the stuff that they're wearing, and you don't hear a peep about it. So yeah, I hate when politicians start getting involved with sports organizations, because usually it doesn't end well. And it may not end well here, but I think this is a legitimate point. It's like, look, you say you're all about this. So let's look at what you're actually doing, what you're actually funding, and the conditions of the people that you are encouraging by your involvement with this.
I want to know, has LeBron James ever toured, and I'm just using LeBron as one example. I'm not trying to pin it on him, but I would like to have a conversation with LeBron James or James Harden or any one of these guys. Have you actually ever seen a factory where your stuff is made? Have you actually asked Nike, please take me to a factory to see who makes my stuff and see how it is made and see how those people are treated? I want to hear I really do want to hear an answer to that question.
Well, but the thing is that if Nike took them to a factory, they would take them not to the factory where maybe things are actually being made. It would be their presentation of a factory.
Garrick, that's my point.
Right.
If these guys really care,
if they actually saw, yes,
have the World Health Organization set it up.
Whoa, there you go. Okay. Hey,
Hecho en Mexico.
We're winding down on time. Josh, now that we have you here in between diaper changes of your...
Wait. Before we go to Josh, real quick, we skipped quickly past football, soccer. And I have to say, because the U.S. is actually taking on Mexico for the championship of the CONCACAF on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The USA beat Qatar yesterday.
They beat Qatar. Forgot about
that. And Mexico was able to beat Canada. And that USA game was a great game to watch because Qatar actually had the chance to go in the lead over a somewhat questionable penalty call.
And they had won over. They played a crazy good game against. I'm sorry, Alex Roldan plays for them. Which country is?
Oh yeah, Guatemala.
No.
Or Honduras.
No.
Sorry.
I don't see. It's like brain just fell out of head. All right.
Yeah.
¿Dónde está el partido?
Yeah.
Qatar
Where's the game
looked prime.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Where's the game Sunday played at? We're going to be played at.
Is that one it's not in Houston, is it?
I'm not
that's
sure.
That's a Mexican home game, if so.
Yeah, right. I'm not sure where the game's going to be played, but
someone look it up real quick.
Yes, well, they're looking that up, and the USA had an incredible game against Jamaica as well. I think they were caught a little bit off guard. This was last Sunday.
I expected them to lose that game to Jamaica.
Jamaica really was solid, and they were strong. They came out, and like within the first 10 seconds of the game, they nearly scored too. And so it's worth going back and watching if you haven't watched that. It was an exciting and a hard-fought game. The U.S. had to really up their level. But I will say this, and I think there's a combination here, of course, because we're Seattle, most of us are Seattle-based. Christian Roldan from the Seattle Sounders has really made a contribution to the U.S. men's national team, and he is one of the shining stars. I have to just give kudos to him because he is outstanding, and he came in the latter part of both of those games, and he clearly made a difference. And and we scored when he was in.
There's a lot of young U.S. players, and when they put in some of the veterans like Christian Roldan and others, it really made a difference. The final will be held at Allegiant Stadium in Paradise, Nevada. And by the way, Brain turned on El Salvador. So is who Qatar had played.
I think that was the only Central American country I didn't name.
Yeah, I know. And that was the question. Why are they playing in the CONCACAF Gold Cup? Why is
Qatar?
Yeah.
So there's a relationship between the groups. So they represent Asia, and so sometimes they do things like this to encourage
by invitation.
Special invitation.
Okay, for the interest of time, I want to get to Josh and a little bit of what's going on in baseball.
Yeah, well, today has been a flurry of activity, as today was the trade deadline. The Mariners did make a couple of moves. One of the hardest that came a couple days ago was trading Kendall Graveman. Gravy has been nails this season, one of the best relievers in baseball, and going to the Astros just days after one of the biggest comeback
hours
we've ever seen. Yeah, I mean, it was hard timing, and Kendall Graveman was emotional about it as well because he was a big piece of the family-like atmosphere that bullpen had built and the belief that they had in each other. So hard to see go, but when you step back from the emotions of it, you really understand, like, look, this guy this guy was on a 1-year deal, so his contract was up at the end of the year. So he's a rental player. We might even sign him back, because we love Gravy here, and Jerry Dipoto said as much that he really likes him. But we get Toro back from the Astros, who is a top prospect, switch hitting infielder whose bat hasn't really come around, but at the same time, he hasn't had a lot of playing time behind some all-star players there with the Stros. We did bring in a reliever that looks to be our closer now as well, but it's the trade deadline actually at the time of recording this just passed like 20 minutes ago, so I'm still trying to catch up on all the trades that are made throughout the league. But there's been a lot of big names moved around all over the place. But I think as far as the Mariners go, we are set up well for success down the road, having added a good reliever that can be our closer with club control for the next 3 years, albeit via arbitration. And adding another infielder that was kind of our position of weakness right now, especially with some of the injuries. We need to have a couple more answers there. Hopefully an upgrade over Dylan Moore, who Dylan Moore is a hero, don't get me wrong. Especially with that grand slam to beat our division rival just a couple of days ago. But you know what? These Mariners have been fun to watch. They have lived up to the hype of be difficult to play against. And right now we're sitting 2 games back out of the wild card with a 3-game series against Texas, who has been kind of in the dumps and traded away some of their big pieces. So I'm excited to see what comes of this year. I think it's still possible we sneak into a wild card, but as Jerry Dipoto made it clear, we're not trying to build for this year to sneak into a wild card. We're trying to build to win a World Series and be competitive for the
Mariners World Series.
Someday
we may report it.
This Abraham Toro that was in the middle of this controversial, to say the least, deal. So he did come in and homer in his first 2 games for the Mariners. But get this, he homered also against the Mariners in the first game of the series for Houston, and he is the first player ever to homer in back-to-back games for each team.
Ooh. That's a good little.
That's a long. That's a good little tidbit.
Cool. Can you imagine?
That's
can you imagine the switch,
had to be awkward walking into that clubhouse. Yeah, had to be awkward walking into that clubhouse. But if there's a good way to start endearing yourself to your new teammates, that's a good way to do it.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it, guys. It's time for us to take our final shot. We give a quick shout out to an issue. Sometimes it's on the field, sometimes off. It's our
final shot.
Josh, final shot.
Man, what to even do today? It's been so crazy. All of the news coming through this week. It's been a good time to be a sports fan. Final shot, though. I'm going to go to the Kraken. I'm excited for what they're doing here. It's been difficult because by all accounts they're about a B. They haven't done anything outstanding, but they haven't done anything wrong. And I know that it feels like there's more to come. It feels like there's a dam of building up of like what's going to happen. They still have trade space. They haven't done anything crazy. Haven't done any crazy trades. They have a good team, but not a great team necessarily. So I'm really excited to see how this comes through and what comes out. So keep watching the Kraken. That's been exciting. Like I said, when they did free agency coming up, I think that's where we're going to see some holes filled here. And, they have a chance to compete this year. I don't know that they necessarily will compete. Don't hold them to the standard of Vegas.
Yeah,
but
it's not going to be like
there's
the
definitely
Golden
a chance
Knights.
in this division.
Okay. Matt Peel, final shot.
Fans are allowed to be at training camp. That's
Whoop!
nice.
Yeah.
Fans can go to training
It's gonna
camp
be
and get
good.
autographs and take pictures. So wherever you're at, watching and listening, if you can get to a training camp, go get some autographs and pictures.
Rich Hallstrom, final shot.
Well, I'm going to go back to the Olympics and say this is one of the best stories that's probably come along in Olympic time recently. The relationship between Suni Lee and her father and the way that they worked together to achieve her goal of winning the gymnastics all around for women. He's overcome a lot, fell off a building, helping a neighbor, and has been paralyzed for the last year or two. And she said that he was his number one. He was her number one inspiration for everything that she did. So I think that's a relationship and a picture of caring about someone that we should emulate, and I think it's one that Christ would be pretty proud of.
Brent R. Baker.
We're talking about final shot, but I could not give a shot that is the equivalent of what Aaron Rodgers and Brian Gutekunst have been involved with for the Green Bay Packers this week. I don't know if I've ever listened to a high-profile athlete that so specifically burned down his own organization. As far as the criticism of how the organization handled like players that he named, his old teammates, probably 15 of them. And then having the GM come on and say, well, yes, we signed Randall Cobb because this was a very important thing, because Aaron Rodgers wanted this, and we wouldn't have done this if it weren't for what Aaron wanted. So it's sort of the opposite of the way the Seahawks and Russell Wilson handled their tension this past year, where they let everybody else talk about them, but you didn't hear a peep from either. And whatever they needed to do to resolve things, apparently that happened behind the scenes. But we're seeing this play out for Green Bay, and I'm glad it's them and not us.
Awkward. Garrick, final shot.
Well, I heard another feel-good Olympics story. This young athlete at the age of 18 was not planning to compete in the Olympics. She just decided to go out and give a try at the trials. And Haley Hernandez, 18-year-old 3-meter diver, went out there. And not only did she make the U.S. Olympic team, she actually made it all the way through to the semifinals. And so I'm excited to see how she does. She's young. She hasn't really developed in terms of her diving, but she has been so consistent. And it's just one of those wonderful stories that, people are like, wow. And it was fun as well to see her teammates just cheering her on and supporting her. And that just was a beautiful story. So, and then since I wasn't here last week, I get one more, because last week I was in SoFi Stadium. And so this is the first time I think we've ever given a stadium our final shot. That place is incredible. They'll be hosting the Super Bowl there next year. And Justin Bieber performed for a concert for us last week.
Woohoo.
Yeah, it was amazing though. Beautiful architecture, great design.
Matt's favorite artist.
Oh, Bieber, yeah. I got all his albums.
He's a talented guy. I'll just leave it at that,
so
guys. Yeah. I want to give my final shot. Speaking of stories, to a movie I saw this week that I would encourage everybody to watch. It's called Greater, and it's the Brandon Burlsworth story. What a opportunity. I mean, what a story. This is part of the trailer.
Come right on up and on. Get in there. That's my brother. He's Trey Rouches.
You want to walk on? Head your own way? We certainly won't stop you. There ain't no way you're ever going to play. Not here.
It just might make it. Make it. I just hope he lives. Why are you wasting your time working with that kid?
Well, he wants it more than any of them.
If I can teach my son how to walk, I can teach you these steps. You just got your butt kicked by a walker. That is no walker. And Lord knows that you've worked harder than anybody else, on and off the field.
You are living proof that when you do the right things, good stuff happens.
When you do the right thing, good stuff happens. My God, guys, what a freaking story. That movie is astounding. It's the very true story of a young guy who was a walk-on for the Razorbacks. He unfortunately passed away at the age of 22 because of a car accident. Brian Burlsworth walked on. He walked on 50 pounds. He's like over 300 pounds of nothing but fat because, well, the coach said you got to be you're too big. you're too small. You're not going to make it. You gotta gain weight. Well, he didn't mean that he had to get fat, but the kid worked so hard. And eventually he was able to get a scholarship as a walk-on. he was able to get drafted by the NFL. And I mean, what a story all the way around. It was a beautiful story. But this young man had a faith, and his faith really propelled him. The movie's name is Greater. It's part of what's on his gravestone, that our loss is great, but God is greater. Oh my gosh. Josh, I want you to watch that. That's your homework. So a really good film, an inspiring story. And one of the reasons why we do Sports Time Out, because there's a struggle that goes on beyond just the games. It's an inner struggle. You need that it factor, something more, something greater. And when you find that something greater, for us, we talk about the God story. There is something greater there that can propel you through the challenges of the game of life. So just something to think about, food for thought as we take it on in our Sports Timeout. Remember, you can go to MyMichelleLive.com, find out more about all these guys that I get to hang out with on Fridays. Some of them have some great businesses that you can connect with, books that they've written. You can find all of that out. You can find out more about things like Calitrin, Fountain of Youth in the Bottle, and one of our sponsors. And hey, guys, have an outstanding weekend. You all get gold in my book. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle.
For more fun, go to MyMichelleLive.com.
Oh, absolutely. Guys, thank you so much. It is kind of a wrap.
The recording has stopped.
We're still recording because the battery in my mouse